Welcome, welcome, welcome to this here episode of the Pixelated Sausage Show. I'm in a bit of a weird sitting position to make this the most comfortable and potentially unpainful and completable because, well, first, hi, how are y'all doing? I am, of course, your host, Marcus. Hope y'all are doing well. I had a bit of a accident on Sunday night. Bit of a fall. Scary. 2 falls. And I hurt my lower back on the left side quite a bit. It's not in a constant pain, and if I put pressure on it, there's no pain. But where it is currently now, it's gradually been getting better, but it's like if you've ever pinched a nerve in your neck where your range of movement is inhibited by the pinched nerve, where when you move your neck in a certain way to a certain position, there will be a point where your body says, no, I don't really want you to do that right now. Give me a few days and maybe I'll let you go back to the way you were. I'm hoping that's the case here with my back, but I haven't been able to do all that much. A lot of bed rest, hoping it heals on its own. We shall see. But being me, as people would expect and surprising no one, I still feel the need, the inclination, the whatever. We all know how much I love the word whatever to record this podcast. I'm trying my best not to sniffle because in the pre-recording, did a bit of a sniffle in my regular, typical seating position, which if I'm not doing anything, was fine. But with the sniffle, ooh, that stung. Also, deep breaths are something that I have to be in the right position to make feel okay. But here we are, and let us just get this show on the road. On today's show, speaking of shows, I will be talking about quite a few games, but there are a lot of small games. And some games that are buggy and don't have much to say about them currently. But the games that you will hear me talking about include Star Wars Bounty Hunter, which is an old game that got recently re-released at the time of this release of this podcast. Release. Sword and Fairy Inn 2, Retaliate, Super Woden GP II, Mist of Noyah, Busway Islands, Dash Puzzle, and Harvest Days. Before I get to all that, I want to talk a little bit about I saw the TV Glow, which I watched and thought was not that great. If I were to score it, I would give it 2 out of 5. Which isn't bad, but it's in the realm of I would not put this in my collection. 2.5 stars, depending on, well, a 1 star, a 0 star if it's in a franchise could end up in my collection, like MCU movies or Fast movies, 007 movies. I'm trying to think of all the series that have carte blanche. Would that be right? I've never really used that term, but we've got Star Wars, Star Trek, MCU, Fast, what have you. I just wanted to rhyme with MCU, and what have you was there, staring at me. But the thing about I Saw the TV Glow is it's a very, very, very well-made movie. It knocks that 90s aesthetic out of the park. And in many spaces, many ways, I can relate to it more than any other movie. However, I think the filmmaking gets in the way and distracts and takes away from at least my ability to fully relate and appreciate the movie. I was talking to Anshi, who I know loved the movie, and after watching it, I could tell if I watched it before him, I would have immediately gone to him and said, "You need to watch this because this is you. You will love this movie. This is so you." But after I watched it, I came away thinking, if I saw this when I was in high school, it would have been my favorite movie of all time. I would have watched it over and over and over again, because in that period, this would have especially clicked with me and been something that felt like a piece of me. It would have been a case where I watched a movie and felt seen, which is always appreciated. But as a 38-year-old, it doesn't really jive with me completely. Despite the fact, again, that I can really relate to certain things about it. My favorite scene in the whole movie, which isn't super spoilery, but it's a scene because I can really relate to this scene in particular, and I think it's so well shot and well acted, is when the lead, I can't remember if she identifies, well, it would be they, as non-binary in the movie. I'm pretty sure the actor is non-binary from Atypical. But when, and I wish I knew their name, but after they've watched some of the, I forget the name of the TV show that's in the movie, when they're asking Justice Smith's character about whether or not they like girls or like boys, and he responds with a shrug, I think something along those lines, because it's not something that really registers or he thinks about. And she draws the little logo character thing from the show on the back of his neck. And those kind of innocent forms of intimacy are something I really connect with. So that scene is the one that, for me, most of all, I connected with. But the movie as a whole didn't really work for me. It's very talky in ways where I feel like it could have lessened that and done some more interest. Again, not a bad movie. I think it's more so I'm no longer in the demographic per se. I think this is going to be a movie that we already know is very, very popular and well received, all that. But I do think for a certain group of people, this is going to be very, very special. And the movie I thought of that kind of falls into the same place and hit for me a lot stronger, because I think filmmaking wise, it's much more typical and therefore doesn't have these ways of having that filmmaking get in the way, but also the time it came out, I was in a very, very, very different place. And I didn't read the book that the movie is based on, but The Perks of Being a Wallflower is another movie that is similar, where I could relate in many, many, many ways. Trying to get a deep breath in there. But I would recommend I Saw the TV Glow to anyone who is even moderately, minutely interested in it. If you look at the trailer and you think, no way in hell would I like this, then you probably should avoid it because you probably won't like it. But I think if you're even a smidge interested, it's worth checking out because it is very, very well made, and it may be something that ends up being very, very special to you. But that's all I want to talk about movie-wise and whatnot, because I want to make sure I can finish this episode. Let us start with what I've been playing. Well, we're going to continue with what I've been playing. Starting with, though, Star Wars Bounty Hunter. I never played this game when it originally came out. I don't know if it came out on all platforms or just PS2, but it's a PS2 era game. And this is 100% a case of I'm glad it exists for preservation's sake, but the game itself is, I don't know if it was always this janky, messy thing, but it's not the best game. Visually, it's been cleaned up and it looks pretty alright and it plays okay, it runs well. However, there are two control settings. You can only change them in the main menu, not when you're in-game in the middle of a level. But there are the legacy controls and the modern controls. I only try the modern controls because even my issues with the modern controls, looking at the legacy controls, it would be not even really a band-aid to my issue, but just a different wound somewhere else. It wouldn't fix my issues with the controls. It would fix one issue and then bring up a few others, basically. But my main issue with the game and the way it plays is that the combat, you're mainly shooting. You can also do melee, and then you have this device to entrap someone if they're an additional bounty, so you can earn some bonuses for a mission. But when you're shooting, to lock onto an enemy, you push in the right analog stick. That's fine, whatever. Right trigger to shoot and left trigger to aim. But the issue with that right analog stick to lock on is that, as you would expect, moving the right analog stick moves the camera. That's very typical. No surprise there. And this next thing is going to be typical too, but therein will lie a problem. You also push in the right analog stick, not only to lock onto an enemy, if you want to be more accurate, but also to recenter the camera behind your character if you've rotated it and it's not perfectly behind them. The fact that this does both things means that in combat scenarios, when you have a lot of enemies on screen, it can get really fiddly whether it locks onto an enemy or recenters the camera. And this can make the experience an absolute nightmare, especially if you are in a tight corridor. If you're in an open space, it's usually not a problem, and it seems like you will lock on if you are facing an enemy, if your character is facing an enemy, but not if you rotate the camera and you see an enemy. It doesn't matter if you, as the camera person, sees the enemy, but that Boba Fett specifically sees the enemy. And that just became an absolute nightmare. The levels that I played aren't particularly fun to mess around in. Platforming is a bit finicky at times. The story, typical Star Wars stuff. I think it's Darth Sidious needs you to go take down at least his first mission. Maybe the whole thing, I'm not entirely sure. This cult that is getting in the way of what he wants to do. So you've been called upon to get shit done. But it just is a bit janky in a way that I can't quite get behind. But again, I love the fact that this exists because I think preservation, whether it is making old games backward compatible or not remaking, what is the other term? Remastering games, even just porting games. This is probably more of a middling remaster, but I also think about those Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance games, which I don't know if any work was done on them, but regardless, I do like seeing this because it's nice for games to be available on modern hardware in an easy way that is purchasable legally so that you can have these games if you want them, or you can try them if you want them. So that is Star Wars Bounty Hunter. Next is Sword and Fairy Inn 2. Can't speak to the first game, but this seems like a hybrid between a visual novel and a restaurant management game, where at the beginning of each day, you have a bit of story delivered via a visual novel. Very, very light stuff, not a lot of reading, no choices up until the point that I stopped playing, and not all that interesting. And then when you get to the restaurant management side, it's very, very, very simple, dull, boring stuff where you pick out your menu, you select what you want to have on the menu, and then you take your staff and put them in various positions. If someone is really good at cooking, you put them in as a chef. You have your servers. You can have a manager, and then you have cleaning staff if some of the rooms in your little restaurant hotel type thing is needing cleaning. And then when you set all that up, you start the workday, and customers will come in, wait on a bench to be seated, and then they're served. And all of that happens automatically. And all you have to do is look at the people on the bench and seat them or reject them as they come in. If there are open spaces, or maybe there's just going to be too long of a wait for the cook to get through the tables that are seated, so you reject people, and that's all you're doing. If you put someone in the manager position, then all of this plays out automatically, which is nice because you're not really doing much if you are controlling it yourself. However, that does take away someone from another position, whether that's having an additional server, an additional cook, and so on. So as much as it is nice to not have to do anything, losing that additional worker somewhere else is not ideal for the best results. And then occasionally there are some mini games that happen, story related it seems, where you have a battle with someone cooking where you have a recipe and then you have to put the ingredients in order and they're mapped to the face buttons, and it's very simple, very easy. But I found the game very confusing in the sense that I didn't see what the point of any of it was. And I really wanted to recruit some people. I earned money, I earned resources. I didn't know what I could use these for, if I could use them for anything. Because I did maybe a week's worth of days, and I couldn't hire anyone to fill additional roles. I recruited someone at some point as part of the story. I think I recruited someone after I beat them. Maybe it was beating them in that mini game, but I don't know where they went. I recruited them. It said I recruited this character. They weren't in my staff list. I don't know where they were. So, okay. And I earned an additional table with leveling up my restaurant. So it seems like that is something it seems like only leveling up your restaurant is how you gain certain things, and not through collecting resources and then crafting stuff yourself. It all seemed a bit weird, and the core gameplay was very, very minimal in terms of user input, to the point of feeling pointless and probably should just be a thing that automatically plays for itself, regardless of whether you put someone in the management position or not. So that didn't really do much for me. That is against Sword and Fairy in 2. Next is Retaliate, which I really, 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 really like. I wish fidelity-wise, art-wise, it was better, because it's a pretty plain-looking shmup-ish with barely any shading to the in-game. It felt very flat, the art, and it didn't look that great. However, I love the gameplay because it takes this very laid out, and it's less so shmup and more so kind of like Galaga, in that you will take on waves while you're going through a level until you eventually reach a boss. But what I like about it is that your typical shmup, you just have enemies coming at you and then you're shooting at them and avoiding their fire. Your bullet hell situation, right? What this does is, when you start a level, you have no ammo. You have no ammo. You have no ammo. The way you gain ammo is by activating your shield when you're about to be hit by some bullets, and every bullet you absorb with your shield becomes ammo for your gun. And you could stack this a lot. And I'm pretty sure if you wanted to, you could just, with good timing and utilizing your shield, you could probably not kill anything throughout the entire level and just collect bullets until you reach the boss. But you will be losing out on points and get a lower score, which is what you're playing for, right? To get a high score. But the system of having to collect bullets through gaining them with your shield, absorbing them with your shield, makes for a really fun dynamic. I do kind of wish you couldn't just stack your bullets and that there was a max so that it would encourage you to use your bullets more, because like I said, you could just avoid attacking enemies in the entirety of the level until you reach the boss. And I did that kind of, and would get to the boss with close to 200 bullets, because I would collect a lot of bullets and then shoot a few enemies to just clear a path. Your shield will also absorb ships, so if you are about to get hit by a ship, your shield will protect you from that as well, not just bullets. But that dynamic of having to activate your shield and absorb bullets to get bullets so that you can attack the enemies is really, really fun, and creates a different, unique experience that maybe is something we've seen in a shmup before, but it's not something I can think of off the top of my head. But it's a unique thing that gives it something that makes it stand out from the crowd. Just like how Ikaruga has the color changing mechanic. That is what makes that game stand out from being a solid shmup to one of the best shmups of all time. Am I saying Retaliate is one of the best shmups of all time? No, I think maybe if it had higher production value, we could get there, but it still feels like really strong mechanics and really strong gameplay in need of a bit of an extra oomph on the production side. And as you progress through the game, you will be fighting against enemies with different types of weapons, which you can absorb those. And it seemed like the more powerful the weapon, the projectile, that'll be the first thing you shoot. So early on in the first mission, all you're fighting are enemies with machine bullets. And the second one, you got ones with these rockets, and those will shoot a spread of rockets. It's very, very good. I like it a lot. Again, just wish it looked a bit nicer. And there's a bit of a story in the story mode, but you don't need to pay attention to that at all. I always find it weird in games like this where a developer feels the need to put in some kind of story when really you don't need it. Unless you're going to be doing something very subversive, doing a Doki Doki Literature Club type of thing with a shmup, somehow you don't need to put in a standard typical, hey, I'm a space captain, blah, blah, blah. You're a bad person, I'm going to get you type of story. But definitely check out Retaliate. I'm sure it's not that expensive either. But I was quite pleasantly surprised by it. And Super Woden GP II is an isometric racer, retro-inspired, that has a lot of stuff going on in it. The menu, the UI, is a bit of a cluttered mess, and it just dumps you right in there. It doesn't tell you anything. And the way it works is that you first buy a car from one of the sellers, and then you go to a specific location and partake in races, rallies, endurance races, and I think just general circuits. And you're just gaining money, gaining stars to unlock events in other areas. And there's a lot in the game. It feels really good, and it looks quite nice. Bit of a PlayStation 1 era type vibe to it. There are no mention of the controls anywhere. I don't think you have a handbrake, just gas and brake. And I don't know what there is to really say about it. I really like the way it plays and feels. It is not for, I was going to say the faint of heart, but that just feels like a bit excessive for what the game is. It's not an easy game. Even on the normal difficulty in the arcade mode, for instance, if you make one error, because I think the arcade mode is just at least what I did was just the rallies, the drift racing, where it's you by yourself and you'll have the turn notifications. Easy, left, hard, right, blah, blah, blah. And if you make one flub, you're pretty much screwed. So, and that's on normal. On hard, you have to probably drive perfectly. But if you are someone who enjoys those types of drift-heavy games, if you like an isometric racer that is very reminiscent of those classic games, it's definitely worth checking out because there's a lot of content there in the main campaign story area. A lot of cars to buy. You can upgrade them and whatnot. But it is a bit clunky navigating all that and getting a grasp of things at the very start, because it just throws you in there. It just throws you in the deep end. But I quite enjoyed it. There is local multiplayer, I believe, but no online. And yeah, there are a handful of visual filters. The standard, I think, is called Pencil, and it looks fine. They have some CRT type filters, which don't look the best. But overall, like the way the game looks, like the way it plays. I think sometimes the notifications aren't that helpful, where it'll warn you about certain hazards on the track, but if something is kind of half on the track, half off the track, it won't tell you about them, and you could hit those and then you're screwed. But I liked it. It's the kind of game where I could see myself going back to here and there. I don't know if it's a game I would play just by itself for one long haul or whatever, but it's the kind of game that would feel pretty alright as a this is going to live on your hard drive if you're a fan of racing games and you like classic racing games and you want something in that vein that most importantly controls well. That is one of the most important things, if not the most important thing with a racing game. How does it feel? Does it feel good? Yes? All right, good. Now tell me about the rest of the stuff. Okay, the UI is a bit clunky and crowded. I can get used to that. Doesn't tell me what the controls are. I can figure them out on my own. These filters aren't the best. Well, I don't have to use those. But yeah. Solid game. Then Mist of Noyah. Mist of Noyah. This is a weird one. It's a 2D tree puncher. If you don't know what a tree puncher is, it's just what I've come to learn is a survival game, basically. Your games where you're thrown into some kind of world, like an Ark or any game of that ilk, and you're going around getting trees, getting resources through punching trees initially because you don't have any tools, and crafting, attacking enemies, trying to survive, so on and so forth. And this is just a weird one. It also feels mildly roguelite-ish, where you are leveling up and doing that stuff as well, gaining XP. But if you die, you're reset to this kind of castle-like thing with a few portals. None of it's explained. And it just doesn't feel all that great. When you're attacking enemies, if you get them in a position where they keep attacking you head on, you will always push them back with your attacks and they can't do anything. But if they get into a position where you're missing them, if they get almost any enemy, they get 2 hits on you, even after I leveled up 7 times or so, 2 hits, I'm dead. They'll do a significant amount of damage. It just wasn't jiving with me. You have 5 characters, classes to pick at the beginning, and then when you're not smacking the mic, you name your character, and then you name the world, which I'm assuming is what's generating the seed for your world. And then you're just thrown in, go around doing stuff. There's some dungeons, some towns, collecting these resources, eating apples. It was whatever. I didn't find it all that great or special. My nose. Busway Islands. That was again Mist of Noyah. Busway Islands puzzle is a point-to-point puzzle game, and by that I mean you have a starting point and an end point, and then you have a pathway you need to set from point to point so that, in this case, the bus can go through this path, get to the bus stop to collect their passengers, and then reach the exit. And pretty quickly on, they complicate things by also adding in a train that you have to get to its destination as well, and make it so that the train and the bus do not hit each other, depending on the setup. And I really like games like this, but this one doesn't work. It gets a lot more complicated very, very quickly, which isn't a problem. I like that. What I don't like is the way it controls, and that's what kills the game for me. You can't rotate the camera. Unlike, there's no way to change the controls. And unlike what I feel like is the standard for 95 to 99% of games like this, you scroll around the area, you pan around the area with the right analog stick, and then you move the on-screen cursor with the left analog stick. And I feel like those should be reversed, because the way it is feels very unnatural for me. But more so, the fact that you can't rotate the camera makes looking around this area at these puzzles a bit frustrating at times because it quickly adds in multiple levels. So you have the lower level and then you have the upper level, which is usually where the train will be. And it's not impossible, of course, to figure out everything, but there are times where you're placing road behind something that you just have to remember, okay, this is here and it needs to be rotated this way. Okay, I just need to remember that's there because you can't rotate the camera to actually see that space. And it just feels like, I guess I get it, because how can you have camera rotation with camera panning and then the ability to move a cursor on screen? But just have me hold a trigger to work as a modifier for rotating then? Because I think with the way they want to make, how complicated and big they want to make these levels, you can't just fixed place them and allow you to rotate, probably. I'm trying to think of the size of the levels and if that would work, if you could just have the levels be fixed in place in a fixed camera which you can just rotate but no panning. But the controls kill this game for me, which is a bummer because I really, really like games like this. And if you take away that, because you can pick up pieces and switch them out with any other piece that you can move around and rotate them, and then when you've set up everything the way you want it, you hit the go button and watch them go. And that's all good. It's just the actual act of navigating the space with the given controls that takes away. That is, again, Busway Islands Puzzle. And the last game is Harvest Days, which is a broken mess currently. It's a 3D Stardew Valley Harvest Moon, like, where you are a young man or lady or whatever who really enjoyed spending time on your grandparents' farm, I believe, back in the day. But then you left and went to live in the city. But the town where your grandparents were has been under a mass population exodus and has lost 90% of its population. And in order to get people back, they've created a thing where they will give you a home if you come there and work the farm and help to bring the old town back to its former glory. And you are eager to take up this offer because you long for those days. So you go there, get a farm, and go about doing traditional farming things, meeting with people. But there's a lot of superficial stuff in it. A lot of, what is the term I'm looking for? Just a lot of things that are very simple and not overly thought out. The game is broken in various ways. If you put stuff into storage, you will not be able to take it out. It asked me to name my pet and then name myself. And then when I started the game, it gave me my pet's name, but also my pet had my pet's name. So it was Pokey's farm, and I was Pokey, but so was my cat, was Pokey. That was weird. The mailbox, when I got some mail, I couldn't open it. I couldn't get the mail. The camera movement can be juddery at times. The actual movement of your character, that feels fine. The world itself is a bit of a mess. There's a part where I got to an ocean looking type thing, and the water there was black. And I can't believe that was right. Unless this was an ocean of oil. That did not look right. When you interact with characters and build up your relationship with them, there's no substantial interaction with them. It's just, you've interacted with them once today. Congratulations, your affinity with them has increased. You can't talk to them anymore. Leave them alone. So it's just, it needs some more time in the oven. Because I really like the idea of the game. The world feels like it would be interesting to explore. You can pick up empty bottles and cans and recycle them for money. And do your typical, of course, farming stuff. Tilling the soil, planting, watering, crops, so on and so forth. And I see the potential here. I like games like this, but it's just busted in various ways. And it's a shame because a game like this, it doesn't get a second chance. Even if they patched this and updated it and fixed it, the only way a game like this would end up getting a second chance is if, after it's been fixed, if it does get fixed, some big hot streamer played it. I was like, oh my god, this game is, look at this thing you can do in it. And blah, 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 blah. But outside of that happening, it's just dead. Which is too bad because I can see some potential here, but in its current state, it's just a game you should avoid. Even if you look at it and think, this is right up my alley. Well, I'm sorry to say, not so much. But, and that is again Harvest Days. But that will do it for this here episode of the Pixelated Sausage Show. I hope it was enjoyable. I hope. Yeah, well, as always, once again, I am your host, Marcus Nez. Y'all can find me pretty much everywhere at PX Sausage. I keep talking about, I'm going to really mess around with Blue Sky. And then I think, do I want to? Maybe I should just, I don't want to do Twitter. But wherever I am, if I'm anywhere, it is at PX Sausage. Of course, if you enjoy this here show or any of the stuff I do and what have you, you can support me and my nonsense over at patreon.com/PXS, where you can get a fancy Discord role, access to a private Discord channel, a monthly Q&A, some random drops here and there, and other goodies as well, depending on your tier, of course. And I think, let's all agree, if anything says you should support me if you enjoy this stuff, it's the fact that me being in pain, and I didn't elaborate on this. There's some people who know exactly what happened, and they would say, you're even crazier for doing this because not the result of the fall, but what led to the fall is the scarier part than the fall and the injury. I need to take a deep breath. But the fact that I'm doing this because I'm a crazy person and I should just be taking a break, if that doesn't say, you know what, I'm willing to give you $1 a month, and I don't know what is. Anyway, that is again patreon.com/PXS if you would like to support me, get some goodies, or just support me, whatever you fancy. In addition, though, to the Patreon, you can find links to the site, the YouTube, the Discord, and so much more over at pxsausage.com. That is it. That is all. As always, thank you for watching or listening. I hope you enjoyed this here episode, and I hope you have both a wonderful rest of your day, a lovely rest of your week, and a wonderful weekend. But for now, adios, arrivederci. Bye.
It's go time, go daddy. It's go time, go daddy.